Curious Event, Chapters 1, 2 and 3. Truth Rises from Ruin. Section 1. The Silence Beneath the Ashes. First came the lights. Then came the silence. Recovered log, Station EOS 9. Chapter 1. Something curious. They called it a curious event. The term came from the Terran Scientific Accord, the last serious coalition of Earth's thinkers before the collapse. Not a black hole. Not a pulsar. Not even a war. Just something curious. It began as a fluctuation, a deviation in the background radiation of a quiet system on the edge of Terran-charted space. Uninhabited. No known value. But it sang. Not literally no sound. But instruments caught it, a rhythmic pulse buried in the cosmic microwave background, like something trying to whisper across time. And Earth, greedy for hope or distraction, listened. Chapter 2. The World That Burned. By the time the first research vessel arrived at Lyra, 7, Earth was no longer the world it once was. The wars hadn't been global, they were worse. Slow. Internal. Bureaucratic. Humanity had frayed from the inside out. Governments collapsed not in fire but in silence. The United Terran Authority had become little more than an emergency broadcast loop. Survivors clung to orbital colonies and floating cities, praying for a miracle from among the stars. Lyra, 7 was supposed to be a lifeless rock. But when the ship's celestial warden dropped into orbit, they found something waiting. A structure. Not metal. Not stone. Something else. Tall. Black. Smooth like glass but soft like shadow. It pierced the planet's crust and rose into the sky. No doors. No seams. Just one smooth tower humming with that same pulse Earth had heard from light years away. Chapter 3. Forgotten Signals. Dr. Avani Cross stared at the tower through her helmet's faceplate, sweat clinging to her brow despite the sub-zero air. Around her, wind howled across jagged plains of crystalline shale. "This thing shouldn't be here," she muttered. Lieutenant Harlan Cade checked his rifle again. "You're not paid to be surprised." "I'm not paid at all. No one is. We're here because the authority's desperate, and because you and I were dumb enough to volunteer." Cade gave a short, bitter laugh. "Touché." The tower didn't react to their approach. But as Avani reached out, her gloved fingers just inches from the obsidian surface, it shimmered. Not visibly. Not to the eye. But in her mind. A vibration. A memory. Something ancient and sad. "I heard it," she whispered. "Heard what?" Avani slowly turned. A voice. Saying my name. Chapter 4. The Door That Wasn't. Later, under orbit watch from Celestial Warden, the team established a perimeter. The tower remained inert. No signals. No energy spikes. Until midnight. That's when the seismic tremor hit. It wasn't an earthquake, it was deliberate. A pulse from below. The tower's base split open, not with violence but with elegance. A seam parted, revealing a staircase that spiraled downward. Dr. Avani stood at the edge of it. The black steps shimmered in torchlight, absorbing illumination rather than reflecting it. She knew somehow this was meant for her. "No drones," she said. "I'm going in." Cade grabbed her arm. "This is a death wish." "No," she said quietly. "It's a summons." Chapter 5. Descent. The stairs stretched deep into the planet. Not downward, inward. With every step the pressure changed. Gravity shifted. The air thickened with intention. Avani's breath fogged inside her helmet. Then she reached it. A chamber. Impossible in size. Lit not by lamps but by thought. And at its center, a dais. On the dais, a cube. No, not a cube. A fragment. Floating. Spinning. Whispering in a language she shouldn't understand, yet did. "You were once many. Now you are broken. But you will rise again." Her knees buckled. Not from fear. From recognition. Chapter 6. Memory Constructs. Back aboard the Celestial Warden, chaos bloomed. The orbiting ship picked up something, not a signal. A feedback wave. It rippled through the hull, disabling every system for 4.2 seconds. But in that brief moment, dreams emerged. Everyone saw something different. Cade saw oceans on fire. The pilot saw a woman made of circuits. One of the technicians screamed and didn't stop screaming until he lost consciousness. Only Avani remained calm. She walked back onto the ship with the cube cradled in a containment field. "This isn't alien," she said. Everyone stared at her. She smiled faintly. "It's human." Chapter 7. Forbidden Archives. Within the cube lay data. Ancient data. But formatted in Earth Standard Code, Something abandoned centuries ago. When decrypted, it unraveled more than information. It showed ruin. Civilizations that rose and fell before Earth's first fire. Wars fought in dimensions humanity hadn't named. And then, remnants. Fragments of human DNA on worlds where no Terran ship had ever gone. How is this possible? Cade demanded. Avani pointed at one specific glyph, repeated throughout. Because Earth isn't the start, she said. It's the restart. And someone, or something, left behind the instructions. Chapter 8, The Original Departure. The final image the cube shared before it went inert was simple. A vessel. Colossal. Triangular, with wings curved like arms in mourning. And inside it, sleeping in graph coffins lined with neural silk. Humans. Not like the ones on Earth. Older. Taller. Eyes like glass. Skin etched with maps of constellations no longer in the sky. They left us behind, Avani whispered. Or we left them. The truth wasn't clear. But one thing was, the tower didn't call to Earth. It called home. Chapter 9, Council Response. The fractured Terran Authority acted fast. Faster than ever before. All outposts within 50 light-years were put on alert. A fleet was dispatched toward Lyra 7. Communications with independent colonies were re-established. Because if this was true, if humans hadn't originated on Earth, it changed everything. It meant humanity had enemies it didn't even remember. And perhaps worse, it had allies it had abandoned. Chapter 10, Curious No More. Dr. Avani stood on the bridge, watching as the stars outside seemed closer than ever. Cade stood beside her, unreadable. Where do we go now? She held the inert cube in her hands. It's not about where. It's about why. Why what? She looked up. Why we were forgotten. Why we were sent here. Why the stars went silent. And as the ship prepared to enter slipstream, the cube blinked once, and whispered again. Truth rises from ruin. The stars twisted. The past awakened. And the first war of memory was about to begin. Chapter 11, Slipstream. The Celestial Warden breached the stream wall at 4:06 Gulf Standard Time. Slip space opened like a torn curtain, and the vessel entered a corridor of cascading light and warped graph fields. The cube remained quiet, nestled in a containment cradle at the heart of the ship, pulsing once every 47 seconds. That pulse wasn't random. Dr. Avani Cross stared at the data on her holoscreen. The pulses were coordinates. Layered. Dimensional. Beyond 3 axes. Instructions meant to be felt, not plotted. Where does it lead? Cade asked. Avani turned toward him. Not where. When. He blinked. Time coordinates? Or memory? I don't think the cube understands time like we do. Cade leaned back. Terrific. We're chasing ghosts through a tunnel of broken physics. Avani nodded. Exactly. Chapter 12, The Memory War. 3 days into slipspace, the crew began to change. Not physically. They dreamed. Together. Same places. Same people. An empire of golden cities on the edge of collapsing stars. Statues of human forms with eyes like nebulae. Children born from starlight, taught in languages composed of harmonic resonance. The memories were not hallucinations. They were implants. Avani confirmed it with neural scans. The cube was interfacing with their minds. Not to harm but to restore. Genetic reactivation, she whispered to herself. It's waking up parts of us we never knew existed. Cade entered the lab, pale and tense. I saw them, he muttered. I saw the ones who left. And? They were afraid. Not of death. Of something following them. Chapter 13, The Broken Constellation. The cube's data pulsed one final time and locked in coordinates. Destination, Thal 0. A dead zone on ancient star charts. No activity. No records. Just a name etched in old Terran ruins as the Birth Cradle. The Celestial Warden emerged from slipspace into a system devoid of planets. Except one. A rogue world, drifting unanchored, burning softly with unnatural light. Its atmosphere shimmered like oil. Scars carved into its surface formed patterns, massive glyphs visible from orbit. Not writing. Warnings. The cube became warm in Avani's hands. It knows this place, she said. It's where it began. Chapter 14, The Archive of Stars. They landed on Thal 0. No resistance. No systems detected. But the planet felt alive. Gravity fluctuated with emotion. Colors changed with proximity. Time slowed near the ruins as though the world mourned its own collapse. The team entered the central temple, an obsidian dome etched with shifting constellations. Inside they found it, the archive. Not a library. Not digital. Organic. Living neurons embedded in crystal. A brain the size of a cathedral. And when the cube was placed at its center, the archive spoke. Not in voice. Not in thought. In truth. Chapter 15, The Betrayal. The archive unfolded history like a storm. Earth was never the origin. It was the exile. Millennia ago, the first human empire, the Solari Concord, ruled from Thal Zero across hundreds of systems. Unity through genetic perfection. Thought-linked civilizations. Peace sustained by brutal control. Then came dissent. A faction, those who believed humanity should remain flawed, adaptable, rose against the Concord. The war scorched galaxies. Black holes were born as weapons. Time loops used as shields. In the end, the rebels were defeated. But not killed. They were erased. Mind wiped, DNA altered, and sent to a distant, uncharted world to live unaware of their origin. That world was Earth. Avani's hands trembled. Her voice cracked. "We're not humanity's future," she said. "We're its amnesia." Chapter 16, The Signal That Should Not Exist. The archive, upon awakening, emitted a burst transmission across FTL channels. Unencrypted. Intentional. Cade's face turned white as he tracked the outgoing signal. Someone's listening. He was right. Within hours, the system detected inbound anomalies, fractures in local spacetime, precursors to arrival. But no ship registered. Avani stared into the swirling sky. "They're not coming," she whispered. "They're returning." Chapter 17, The Remnants Stir. On the outer rim of the dying system, lights blinked into existence. Ships, but not like Earth's. Slick, silent, gravity-warping hulls. Emitting no heat. No communication. They hovered just outside scan range. Watching. Cade raised the ship's defenses. "You think they're Solari?" "No," Avani said. "Then who?" She glanced at the cube. "The ones who never forgot. The ones who stayed awake while we slept." And then, without warning, the first of them spoke, through the minds of every crew member. "You have opened the wound. Now you must bleed." Chapter 18, The Divide Within. Half the crew wanted to flee. The other half wanted answers. Cade called an emergency session. "If we leave now, maybe they won't follow." Avani stood. "They already have. We lit a beacon with the cube. Thal Zero was never abandoned. It was preserved for us. They're not here to punish. They're here to judge." A long silence. Then the pilot, Lieutenant Mares, spoke quietly. "I saw my daughter in the dream. But she was older. Leading armies. Wearing armor of light." Cade looked at him. "So?" She called herself descendant. She said I was the last of the forgotten line. Chapter 19, The First Strike. At 0300 GST, one of the alien ships blinked forward, teleporting inside orbit range without propulsion. It fired. Not a laser. Not a missile. A thought. Reality cracked along the Celestial Warden's port side. Time fractured. One crew member aged 80 years in a second and died whispering, "The sun has teeth." The ship reeled. And the archive reacted. It sent a burst of counter-energy that reversed entropy for a moment, rewinding the event. No one could explain it. Except Avani. "It's protecting us." Chapter 20, Echoes Become Thunder. The orbit darkened as more vessels arrived. Dozens, then hundreds. Some bore Solari designs. Others were different. Ancient, crude. Like relics. And yet they all had one thing in common. Humanity. Split. Fragmented. Evolved in ways Earth could no longer recognize. A war was coming. Not for land. Not for power. For truth. And Earth's forgotten children were at the center of it. The archive pulsed again. "They are the pieces of you. Broken by exile. You must decide, rejoin, or be erased again." Avani clenched her fists. "We didn't start this," she whispered. "But maybe we're the only ones who can end it." Chapter 21, The Storm Begins. Thal Zero, the cradled world of ancient humanity, no longer sat quiet under its shrouded sky. The orbital void around it was thick with ships, some shaped like daggers, others like twisted trees of metal and light. Many bore human-like figures in their insignias. None of them spoke in words. They waited. Observed. Judged. On board the Celestial Warden, alarms screamed softly beneath a veneer of calm. Avani stood before the central archive once again. The cube now floated above the neural dais, turning slowly, its surface cracked with faint golden light, like a wound preparing to reopen. The inheritance is at hand, the archive whispered to her alone. Kate approached with a grim face. Scanners show microspace distortions. They're not just here to watch anymore. Avani's hand tightened on the rail. They want to know if we're the ones worth uniting. Kate scoffed. Or eliminating. Chapter 22, Waking the Earthborn. Captain Elias of the Virian Covenant, one of the oldest known human-descended factions, appeared via neural projection. He stood 10 feet tall, glowing with bioelectric tattoos and eyes that flickered like twin stars. We watched Earth fall into forgetfulness. It was necessary. You were too raw. Too dangerous. Avani faced him in the virtual chamber, flanked by data projections and flickering memories. You erased us. We preserved you. Memory is not identity, and identity is what led to the collapse. Now, you remember. Kate growled. You think that makes this okay? No. But now you must choose. The Concord is broken. The archive has awakened. The fractured are coming. Fractured. Those who rejected unity. Who embraced entropy. Who believe humanity should rule, not survive. Chapter 23, Fractured Suns. At the edge of the system, rifts opened, crimson spirals of coalesced pain. Out came the fractured, biomechanical ships shaped like claws and thorns. Their signals were broken static and maddening whispers. These were the children of rebellion, forgotten by both Concord and Earth. Inside them were humans, if they could still be called that. Warped by centuries of unregulated evolution, adapted to darkness, raised on the idea that the archive was a lie meant to enslave free minds. Their leader was known only as Sverin the Unshaped. He broadcast one message. Truth is a cage. Burn the cage. Burn the stars. The war began with a whisper, and ended the silence of 10,000 years. Chapter 24, The Human in the Middle. Earth's envoy to the archive was still Avani. Why her? The cube had chosen. She carried something in her genome, a forgotten marker. Descendant of both Concord and Rebel lines. A rare genetic synthesis. A living contradiction. The archive's voice deepened. Ancient. Resonant. You are balance. Not perfection. Not power. But the seed of something new. She stood before representatives of 3 factions now. The Virian Covenant, seeking restoration of the Golden Age. The Fractured Suns, demanding destruction of the archive and its legacy. And the exiled Echoes, remnants who had watched Earth in silence and wished to simply return home. Avani stepped forward. Her voice cracked. I am from the world you forgot. But we endured. We suffered. We remembered even when we didn't know what we had lost. Sverin laughed from his throne link. You're nothing but dust. And yet, Avani said, lifting the cube, we're the only ones still willing to listen. Chapter 25, Memory as Weapon. The first battle didn't begin with ships. It began with thoughts. The Fractured Suns launched psychic barrages, weaponized memory echoes. Nightmares inserted into crew minds. Visions of dying stars and collapsing cradles. Time-loop trauma. Half the Celestial Warden's crew fell into comas. Others turned on each other in fugue states. But the archive responded. Avani felt it surge through her nervous system, like a wave of ancient lullabies and encoded truth. She grabbed the neural uplink and projected herself outward, her consciousness amplified through the cube and the planetary cortex. Enough. Across space, minds paused. The archive's presence filled the system. And for a moment, war stood still. Chapter 26, The Lost Children Speak. From the far edge of the confrontation, ships emerged, tiny, battered vessels. No weapons. No shields. They were the drifters, colonies of humans who had neither joined the Concord nor the Fractured. Lost children of the Exodus. Farmers, traders, storytellers. They approached the battlefield unarmed and broadcast an ancient Earth song. You are my sunshine. And suddenly, even the war-hardened fleets hesitated. The drifters opened their holds, not to fight but to remember. Their archives contained recordings of first contact. Of Earth's first colonies. Of the day the Concord fell. And proof that Earth had not been the exile's prison. It had been a chance. To reset. Sverin's fleet faltered. Chapter 27, The Decision. The archive stirred. You have seen what division brings. Now see what union can create. Avani stood at the center of it all. 3 choices lay before her. 1. Reactivate the Concord, re-establishing golden unity through enforced order. 2. Side with the Fractured, burn all systems, begin anew with entropy. 3. Choose a new path, one that accepts flaw and growth, past and future, memory and choice. She looked at Cade, her crew, the drifters' little ships. And she chose the third. The archive pulsed one final time. And transformed. Chapter 28, Ascension. The planet cracked. Not in destruction, but in revelation. Thal Zero shed its outer crust. From its core rose a seed world, glowing with threads of living metal and organic memory. A new kind of world, meant not to rule, not to hide, but to share. The cube dissolved, its knowledge flooding into all factions. Some rejected it and left, vanishing into the void. Some embraced it and began to rebuild. The fractured suns, many of them fell silent. Others turned their ships and fled, unwilling to face the truth. Even Sverren, once unshakable, whispered a last message before disappearing. The cage is broken. Let the stars decide. Chapter 29, Earth Awakens. Avani returned to Earth, not as a savior but as a messenger. With her came the knowledge of the past and a seed of the new archive. Earth's skies filled with strange stars, ships arriving not to conquer but to remember. Refugees, explorers, descendants. The ruins of the old world became birthplaces for the new. Children were born speaking old words and dreaming new dreams. For the first time in millennia, humanity remembered what it was meant to be. Not perfect, not supreme, but infinite in possibility. Chapter 30, Truth Rises from Ruin. The archive lives now on Earth and in every world that once held forgotten kin. The stars are no longer silent. The song of humanity has returned, fractured, chaotic, beautiful. And the curious event that started it all? It's no longer curious. It was the moment humanity became whole again. Chapter 31, Seeds in the Soil of Stars. They called it the Rebirth Accord. Across dozens of systems, vessels bearing the sigil of Earth began docking not as invaders, but as kin. Former enemies stood beneath twin suns, exchanging not weapons but archives. Fractured suns who had once sworn to raise the stars now sent emissaries bearing fragments of ancient knowledge. Proof that even in chaos, purpose could bloom. Avani Cross stood on the hill above the old cradle site of Thal Zero, now remade into the harmonic core. Below her, machines hummed with biofeedback, terraforming with a precision only achievable by collective memory. Her voice was calm when she said, "We are no longer exiles. We are descendants. And finally, we are stewards." Beside her, Cade chuckled. "Think anyone on Earth is ready for that?" "No," she replied. "But they'll learn. Like we did." Chapter 32, Ghosts of the Archive. The archive no longer dictated. It asked. Its knowledge no longer poured like fire. Now it guided gently, threading old truths with new perspectives. Earth had begun the process of integrating the data, education systems rewritten, histories corrected, and languages revived. But with truth came grief. As people awoke to what had been taken from them, memories, potential, even identity, a worldwide mourning followed. In the United Terran Assembly, Avani addressed billions. What we lost was not just memory, it was momentum. But what we've gained is agency. We do not need to rebuild the Solari Empire. We need to build ourselves. And for the first time since the archive awoke, the stars echoed with silence. A silence of agreement. Chapter 33, The Return of the Watchers. Then they came. Not fractured suns. Not Concord loyalists. But the Watchers. A fleet older than any record. Their vessels moved through dimensions instead of space. They did not arrive, they simply appeared. Black as void stone, adorned with sigils that changed based on who observed them. They did not speak through voice or mind link. They used memory. And they showed humanity a vision. A spiral of civilizations rising and falling, all bearing the mark of origin. The Watchers were not gods. They were observers of a cycle. A cycle that humanity had finally broken. Avani fell to her knees in the vision. She saw herself as a girl in the ruins of old Mumbai, clutching a book of star maps, and then as she was now, standing before galactic history itself. And she realized, humanity wasn't meant to survive despite forgetting. It was meant to survive because it could forget, and then choose to remember. The Watchers left without judgment. Only a single word remained, etched in Thal Zero's sky. Continue. Chapter 34, The Last Vault. One final location remained. The coordinates had pulsed faintly from the cube only once, like a dying heartbeat. Avani, Cade, and a small team ventured to the outer edges of the Seraph Belt, beyond the light of known stars. There, buried in the ice of a rogue moon, was the last vault. Inside, a room made of gravity-folded light. In its center, a crystalline figure sat cross-legged, aglow with pulsing veins of data. It opened its eyes and said simply, "I am the last guardian of humanity." Avani didn't speak. She bowed. The guardian did not move, did not attack. It only observed. "I thought the archive was our guide," Cade whispered. The guardian responded. "The archive remembers what was. I exist to ensure what comes next." And then it dissolved into a million shards, each embedding themselves into Avani, Cade, and the others, not as implants but as witness marks. The guardian would live through them. Chapter 35, Star Song. Years passed. Humanity spread, this time not in conquest but in chorus. Worlds once fractured now held festivals in unison. The children of Earth learned the languages of Thal, of the Covenant, of the fractured. Ships were designed not for war but exploration. Some bore musical drives, creating harmonic trails that sang as they traveled. The drifters became historians. The fractured, philosophers. The Concord descendants taught art alongside code. Earth, once forgotten, now led not by dominance but by example. And at the center of it all stood a monument. Not to war. Not to victory. But to curiosity. The same spark that had guided the first ship to that mysterious cube in orbit long ago. Chapter 36, The Children of Fire and Memory. Avani Cross eventually stepped down from her position as Speaker of Earth. In her last address, she stood beneath the newly completed Sky Choir array, which converted star movement into audible frequencies across the planet. She smiled as she said, "We came from ashes. We rose from exile. We were scattered like dust. But now, we are the children of fire and memory, and the galaxy is finally listening." Epilogue, The Curious Event. Somewhere light years away, another cube pulsed in the dark. A child on a distant colony found it buried in the soil. As they touched it, stars bloomed in their eyes. And a voice whispered as it had once before, "Everything you are was once forgotten. Everything you can become is waiting to be remembered." The end. Thank you for reading Curious Event, Chapters 1, 2, and 3, Truth Rises from Ruin. If you enjoyed this story and you want to see more epic human-centered sci-fi stories filled with ancient secrets, forgotten power, and the resilience of our species, subscribe to _the Void Narratives _ on YouTube. Milky Way new worlds await. Let's explore them together. Subscribe, share, and stay curious. Let me know if you'd like an image or audio narration for this story, or if you're ready to begin the next one.